The sun was bright that afternoon and the air was warm but not too hot. The historic tomb had always been a place of quiet respect, a place where visitors came to remember and honor those who had lived long ago. People walked slowly along the paths, taking careful steps on the stone floors, their eyes moving over the old walls, carvings, and statues. Among them was a man who stood out from the crowd in every way possible. He was tall, sharply dressed, and moved with a confidence that made it clear he was used to getting what he wanted. His shoes were polished, his watch gleamed in the sunlight, and his expensive suit marked him as someone wealthy and important. The man had always been used to having the world bend to his wishes. In his office, his employees answered every call and request immediately. In restaurants, he expected special treatment without question. In his world, money meant respect, and respect could always be bought. But in the quiet, historic space of the tomb, his usual power seemed almost irrelevant. Here, rules mattered more than wealth, and respect was earned through patience and understanding, not the thickness of a wallet. As he walked, he noticed a guard standing near one of the main entrances. The guard was older, perhaps in his 50s, with a stern face that spoke of years spent protecting the sacred grounds. He wore a simple uniform, neat and tidy, but nothing flashy. He was not impressed by the man's appearance or his expensive clothes. His eyes followed every visitor with the same careful attention, ensuring that nothing was out of place and that no one disrespected the tomb. The man approached, walking faster than was polite, almost brushing past a family of tourists who were taking photographs. The guard stepped slightly in front of him and gently gestured for him to slow down. "Sir, please walk slowly and follow the rules," he said in a calm, firm voice. His tone was polite, but it carried authority. The man's face tightened. How dare someone tell him what to do? He had traveled far, spent time and money, and now he was being told to slow down by a stranger in a uniform? The words felt like a challenge to his power. He smiled at the guard, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile someone uses when they believe they are about to win a fight before it has even started. "I don't need to be told what to do," the man said loudly, so others could hear. "I am a very important person. I pay for everything, and I expect respect wherever I go." The guard's expression did not change. He looked the man in the eyes and repeated, "Sir, these are the rules. Everyone must follow them. Please walk slowly and respect the area." The man's patience began to evaporate. He had never been refused before, certainly not by someone in a simple uniform. His hand moved to the cup he had been holding, a drink he had purchased just outside the tomb. He shook it slightly, the ice clinking inside. In a flash of anger and arrogance, he threw the drink at the guard. The liquid flew through the air and splashed across the guard's chest. The guard did not move, did not yell, and did not retaliate. He simply stood there, soaked and calm, waiting for the moment to pass. Tourists gasped and some quickly pulled out their phones. A few shouted in shock, but no one dared step closer to the man. They had never seen anyone act so boldly, so rudely in such a sacred place. The man laughed at first, a loud, mocking laugh, convinced that his wealth would protect him. He expected someone to apologize to him for being upset, for daring to challenge him. He expected the guard to bow or run away, or perhaps for someone to quickly pay him attention and try to smooth things over. But the guard did none of these things. His calm presence seemed almost unshakable. "You will regret this," the man muttered under his breath, stepping closer. He wanted to make the guard flinch, wanted to assert control by showing that he could do anything he wanted. But the guard simply wiped a little of the liquid from his uniform with a handkerchief and continued to watch the man. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He did not react in a way that would give the man satisfaction. Meanwhile, visitors around them began whispering. Some were angry on behalf of the guard. Some were shocked at the man's behavior. A few children were staring wide-eyed, unsure why an adult would act so strangely. The man could feel the attention on him, and instead of calming down, he felt more frustrated. How dare they all stare at him as if he had done something wrong? He had money. He had power. He should be untouchable. The guard finally spoke again, calmly, but with a firmness that made it clear he would not be moved. "Sir, please leave this area and respect the rules of the tomb. No one is above these rules." For the first time, the man felt a flicker of unease. He had never been told he could not do something by a person who could not be influenced by money. He looked around, expecting someone, anyone, to come to his side, to apologize for the guard's boldness, to say that he was a respected guest who deserved special treatment. But no one came forward. The other visitors were watching quietly, some filming, some talking in hushed tones, all judging silently. The man's anger began to mix with confusion. He had expected to use his wealth as a shield. He had expected to bend the world to his will. But here, in this ancient place, none of that mattered. His expensive suit, his flashy watch, his polished shoes, all meaningless against the simple dignity of a man who stood for rules and respect. He threw one last glance at the guard, who met his eyes without fear or hesitation, and for the first time that day, the man realized that not everything in life could be bought. Some things, respect, dignity, history, the quiet of a sacred place, were more powerful than any amount of money. With a muttered curse under his breath, he turned and walked away, leaving a trail of whispered conversation and shocked faces behind him. The guard remained standing, calm and composed, as though nothing had happened. The tomb itself seemed to breathe a little easier, the weight of history returning to the quiet spaces between the stone walls and carvings. No one knew what the man would do next, but one thing was certain: this day would be remembered, not because of his wealth or his arrogance, but because of the dignity of the guard and the lesson that no amount of money could replace respect. Even as the man disappeared down the path, the murmurs of visitors continued. Some were inspired by the guard's courage, some were shocked at the man's behavior, and all of them had witnessed a moment that would not soon be forgotten. The tomb had once again shown that some rules are more powerful than any person, and some lessons are more lasting than gold. After the incident at the tomb, the businessman left the site with a sense of anger still burning inside him. At first he tried to brush it off, convincing himself that it was a small matter. After all, he had money, influence, and power. Surely nothing could touch him. But as he walked back to his luxury car, he noticed something that made his confidence waver slightly. The other visitors were whispering, pointing, and in some cases, looking at him with clear disapproval. Phones were being held up, cameras capturing his every move. Back at his hotel, he expected to be greeted with admiration and compliments. Instead, he was met with messages, social media notifications, and news alerts about what had happened at the tomb. Videos of the incident were already circulating online. In one clip, he could see himself clearly, throwing the drink at the guard, his face twisted with frustration, while the guard stood completely calm, soaked but composed. The caption on one popular post read, "Wealth cannot buy respect. Entitled businessman throws drink at tomb guard." The businessman felt a wave of panic rise inside him. How could this happen so quickly? He was used to being in control, to having news disappear or be shaped in his favor, but this was different. The video had spread across multiple social media platforms in less than an hour. People were outraged, expressing their anger in comments, sharing the clip thousands of times. Some called him arrogant, rude, and disrespectful, while others praised the guard for his calm and respectful handling of the situation. He immediately contacted his assistant, a young woman who had worked with him for years. "Find out who is posting this. Take it down, delete it. Nobody should see this," he demanded, pacing back and forth in his suite. His voice was sharp, controlled, but there was fear hidden underneath. His usual confidence seemed to be cracking. The assistant nodded quickly, typing on her laptop. "I will try, sir, but these videos are spreading very fast. People are sharing them on multiple accounts. It may be impossible to remove them all." The businessman stopped pacing. Impossible? That was not a word he liked. He was used to finding solutions to every problem. Money solved problems. Power solved problems. Influence solved problems. But now here was a problem that money could not fix. A situation where influence seemed useless. Over the next few days, the situation worsened. News outlets picked up the story, reporting on the incident in newspapers, on TV, and online. Social media influencers and bloggers discussed it at length, comparing the businessman's behavior to that of others who had acted arrogantly in public. The discussion was everywhere. People debated the role of wealth in society, the importance of respecting cultural sites, and the courage of ordinary people who stood up to arrogance. The businessman tried to counter the narrative by issuing statements through his company's PR team. He claimed it was an accident, that he had been stressed, and that he meant no disrespect. But the calm and dignity of the tomb guard, who had remained composed in the video, made his words seem weak and insincere. Every attempt to redirect the story only seemed to make the backlash stronger. At the same time, his friends and colleagues began acting differently around him. Invitations to social events slowed down, calls went unanswered, and casual messages were delayed or ignored. Some people even spoke privately about how embarrassed they were to be associated with him. For the first time in a long time, the businessman felt isolated. His wealth could not buy the loyalty and admiration he had once taken for granted. He decided to try a more direct approach. He called the management of the tomb, hoping that they would help him or at least minimize the damage. When he reached them, he found no sympathy. They explained calmly that the guard had done nothing wrong, that the rules of the tomb were clear and that his behavior had violated those rules. They told him there would be consequences, including a permanent ban from visiting the site. The businessman argued, offered compensation, and even tried to charm them with flattery, but the management remained firm. In this place, wealth and charm held no power. As the days passed, the businessman began to realize that the world was watching, judging, and remembering. Every meal he had in public, every event he attended, seemed overshadowed by the incident at the tomb. He started to feel a sense of frustration he had never known before. It was not just anger. This was a deeper feeling, a mix of embarrassment, regret, and disbelief. People were seeing him as he truly was, someone who had acted without thought, without respect, and without humility. Meanwhile, the tomb guard, the calm and composed figure from the incident, became something of a local hero. People shared stories of his professionalism, his dignity, and his ability to handle a difficult situation without anger or violence. Children who visited the tomb were told the story by their parents, not as a warning about the businessman, but as a lesson in respect, patience, and courage. The guard's actions reminded everyone that true strength often comes from calmness, integrity, and a refusal to be provoked by arrogance. The businessman watched from a distance as the world continued to react. He saw discussions online about how wealth and power could not erase poor behavior. He saw memes and videos comparing the incident to countless other stories of entitlement and disrespect. The lesson was clear even if he did not yet want to admit it. Being rich did not make him better, and it did not protect him from the consequences of his own actions. As the story continued to spread, he began to notice changes in his business world as well. Investors and partners started asking questions, some quietly, others more openly. They wanted to know how someone with such a public scandal could represent their interests. Some contracts were delayed, some meetings canceled. The businessman began to feel for the first time in his life that his money and status could not shield him from the real-world consequences of behavior and reputation. At home, he spent hours alone thinking about what had happened. He replayed the video over and over in his mind, remembering the calm look of the guard, the shocked faces of visitors, and the way the world had turned its attention on him. He realized that for the first time he could not control the story. He could not erase the moment, could not influence people's perceptions, and could not undo what had been done. He even reached out to the guard through letters and emails, trying to apologize, to explain, to make amends. The guard's responses were polite but firm. He acknowledged the apology but reminded the businessman that actions have consequences, and respect cannot be bought. The businessman read these words carefully. They cut deeper than any social media criticism or news report. They reminded him that dignity, patience, and respect were values he had overlooked in his life, and that no amount of wealth could replace them. The businessman began to notice changes in himself as well. At first it was small, a hesitation before speaking, a pause before making demands. Then it grew. He started to reflect on his past behavior, on moments when he had used wealth or power to push others around. He realized that respect and kindness were not things that could be purchased, and that arrogance often leads to isolation and regret. People around him noticed too. Some colleagues commented on his quieter demeanor, his more thoughtful approach to meetings, and his willingness to listen rather than demand. Some friends returned cautiously, seeing that he was trying to change. While it was not an instant transformation, it was clear that the incident at the tomb had left a lasting impact on him. Even as he tried to rebuild his reputation and learn from his mistakes, the story continued to remind him daily of what had happened. He could not escape the memory of the tomb, the guard, and the lesson that wealth and power are not substitutes for respect, patience, and humility. He realized that some moments define a person, and some actions cannot be undone. The businessmen also began to understand that the guard's calm and dignity had a power of their own. It was not flashy, it was not tied to money, but it was stronger than any insult, any act of aggression, or any attempt to dominate. The guard had shown that respect, patience, and courage could influence the world in ways that wealth never could. And so the businessman continued to reflect, to change, and to learn. He realized that the incident at the tomb was more than just an embarrassing mistake. It was a turning point, a lesson in humility, and a reminder that no matter how much money or power a person has, it cannot replace character and respect. The weeks after the incident at the tomb were the hardest the businessman had ever faced. Everywhere he went, he felt the eyes of the world on him. Even in places where he used to feel safe and respected, he now felt judged. Invitations to high-profile events stopped coming. Calls from longtime friends and associates became rare, and meetings that had once been routine now felt tense and cautious. It was as if the incident at the tomb had opened a window for everyone to see who he really was, and that version of himself was not the one he liked. He spent long hours alone, thinking about what had happened. The memory of the guard's calm, unwavering gaze haunted him more than any social media post or news article. The guard had done nothing except stand firm and follow the rules, yet that simple act had left a lasting impression, not only on the businessman but also on the people who had witnessed it. The businessman began to realize that while he had tried to use wealth and status to dominate, the guard had shown a strength far greater: integrity. In his office, he noticed changes as well. Some business partners were hesitant to move forward on projects. Contracts that had been easy to secure before were now delayed or put under closer scrutiny. He understood that reputation mattered more than money. Wealth could open doors, but it could not fix trust once it was broken. This was a hard lesson for him to accept. He attempted to apologize again, not just to the tomb guard, but to anyone affected by his actions. He wrote letters and emails expressing regret, explaining that his behavior was wrong and acknowledging the lesson he had learned. While many responses were polite but distant, he noticed that some people began to treat him differently, slowly opening small doors of communication again. It was not instant forgiveness, and it would take time, but he realized that sincerity mattered far more than excuses. The businessman also began reflecting on his life beyond the tomb incident. He thought about times when he had been impatient with employees, dismissive of friends, and careless with the feelings of others. He realized that arrogance and entitlement had guided much of his life, and that these traits had isolated him more than any outside force. For the first time, he seriously considered the idea that respect and humility were more valuable than money. Meanwhile, the guard continued his work at the tomb, completely unaware of the full effect the incident had on the businessman's life. To him, it was simply a matter of duty, maintaining the dignity of the site, treating visitors with fairness, and upholding the rules. Visitors continued to share the story of the incident, not to shame the businessman, but to highlight the courage and professionalism of the guard. He became a quiet symbol of what it meant to act with integrity, even when provoked. The businessman decided to visit the tomb once more, not to flaunt his wealth, but to understand, reflect, and show respect. This time he walked slowly, following the rules carefully. He observed the history, read the plaques, and listened to the guides with genuine interest. The change in his attitude was clear to everyone who saw him. He was no longer the impatient, entitled man from the viral video. Instead, he was quiet, thoughtful, and humbled by the experience. When he finally approached the guard, he bowed slightly and offered a sincere apology. "I was wrong," he said softly. "I let my pride and anger take over. I see now that respect cannot be bought. Thank you for showing me that." The guard nodded, acknowledging the apology without any hint of judgment or pride. His calm demeanor remained, and yet in that moment the businessman felt a sense of peace he had never known. Over time, the businessman's life began to change in subtle but meaningful ways. He treated his employees with more patience, listened to others more carefully, and approached business deals with honesty rather than intimidation. He noticed that people responded to him differently. not because he had money, but because he had earned their respect through his actions and attitude. The lesson of the tomb guard stayed with him, reminding him daily that dignity, calmness, and integrity are stronger than wealth or influence. He also started sharing his experience with others. In meetings and social gatherings, he would sometimes recount the incident, not to boast but to teach. He told people how he had acted arrogantly, how the world had reacted, and how a single act of calm integrity had changed his perspective. Many listened intently, some surprised that someone so wealthy could admit mistakes and learn from them. Others found inspiration in his story, realizing that it is never too late to change and grow. The businessman's reputation slowly began to improve, not because of money or power, but because of genuine effort to make amends and behave differently. His personal growth became more valuable than his wealth in the eyes of those around him. Friends who had once distanced themselves began to reconnect, colleagues started to trust him again, and even strangers who had witnessed the original incident now saw him as someone trying to learn and change. At home, he would often replay the memory of the tomb, not with shame or anger, but with gratitude. The incident had been a turning point, a life-changing lesson disguised as a moment of humiliation. He had learned that true strength comes from character, not wealth, that respect must be earned, not bought, and that humility is a quality that money can never replace. He began to notice small changes in himself daily. He was calmer in stressful situations, more patient with people who frustrated him, and more aware of the impact of his actions. He found that treating people with fairness and respect not only improved their reactions but also gave him a sense of satisfaction he had never felt before. He understood now that humility does not make someone weak. It makes them strong in ways that wealth never can. In time, the story of the incident continued to be shared, but now with a new focus. People talked about how the businessman had changed, how he had faced the consequences of his actions, and how he had taken a lesson from someone who had no wealth or status but immense integrity. The tomb guard remained the symbol of quiet strength and dignity, but the businessman's transformation became a story of hope, proof that anyone can learn and grow if they are willing to face their mistakes honestly. Even years later, the businessman would occasionally visit the tomb, walking respectfully, observing the rules, and reflecting on the lesson that had reshaped his life. He understood that his wealth could never erase the memory of what had happened, but that memory now served a higher purpose to remind him every day of the value of respect, patience, and humility. The world around him had not changed. Wealth still existed. Power still mattered, and many people continued to act arrogantly. But he had changed. That change made all the difference. He realized that true wealth was not in money or material possessions, but in the ability to grow, to learn from mistakes, and to treat others with kindness and dignity. Through this experience, the businessman discovered something far more valuable than the wealth he had once believed defined him. He discovered that life is about how you treat people, how you face your mistakes, and how you grow from experiences that challenge your character. The lesson from the tomb guard became a guiding principle in his life, shaping him into a better leader, friend, and person. And so, the story ended not with anger, embarrassment, or defeat, but with understanding, growth, and a quiet sense of triumph, not for wealth, but for the strength of character that could never be bought, borrowed, or stolen. The businessman had learned the hardest way, but the lesson stayed with him forever. Respect, dignity, and humility are worth far more than anything money can buy, and they are the true measures of a person's greatness.